Hi there, I'm Marla. Ever thought your own family could turn against you in ways you never imagined? I trusted them. But behind the smiles, they plotted, twisted, and left scars deeper than betrayal. They tried to crush everything I built. My life, my daughter's spirit, even my bakery. Why would people who once called you family try to destroy you? Before we dive into it, what's the biggest betrayal you've ever felt? Are you listening to this late at night, or maybe on your way to work? And where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below. I'm truly curious. The early morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, casting long gold beams across the faded tile floor. I stood at the counter, slicing apples for Sophie's lunch, her laughter floating from the living room as she played with her stuffed bunny, Mr. Buttons. It was a moment that felt almost perfect. Almost. A thin thread of unease tugged at the back of my mind, a thread I'd been ignoring for far too long. Sophie was all energy and giggles when I dropped her off at school. I hugged her tighter than usual, inhaling the soft lavender scent of her shampoo. She waved from the steps, her little backpack bouncing, and I forced myself to smile and wave back. As I drove away, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. Something felt off. Back home, the silence wrapped around me. I pulled out the small memory card from Mr. Buttons, an idea born months ago when Sophie started coming home quieter, clingier. I slid it into my laptop, telling myself I was just being paranoid. The footage started innocuously enough. Sophie coloring on the floor, Mr. Buttons perched nearby. Then, Ruth's voice snapped through the speakers like a whip. "You're as useless as your mother," she hissed. Travis loomed into view, grabbing Sophie's drawing and tearing it in half. Sophie flinched but didn't cry. She just shrank into herself. My breath caught. I replayed it twice, hands trembling. Ruth's eyes were cold, her mouth twisted into a sneer I barely recognized. And Travis? He laughed. He actually laughed. I slammed the laptop shut, nausea roiling in my gut. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a slip. It was cruelty, deliberate and cutting. By afternoon, I sat across from Ruth at the family law office she insisted we meet at. Her smile was tight, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's just a precaution, honey," she said, sliding a document toward me. "To protect the family from misunderstandings." The words non-disclosure agreement screamed at me from the header. Ruth tapped her manicured nail against the signature line. "You don't want to stir up trouble, do you? Think about Sophie." I stared at the pen she offered, my heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. Ruth's gaze was unblinking, the warmth long gone from her face. For a moment, I saw her as she truly was. A woman who saw my daughter not as family, but as leverage. I walked out without signing. The sharp click of my heels echoed down the sterile hallway, each step heavier than the last. At home, the weight of it crushed me. Should I confront them openly? Risk losing Sophie in a legal battle? Or stay silent, protect her quietly, and let them believe they'd won? 16 years ago. I remembered Ruth's clipped tone when my prom dress was ruined. "Stop crying, Marla. You're embarrassing us." I had swallowed my pain then. I wouldn't now. My hand hovered over the contract that night, its pages spread across the kitchen table like a spider's web. Sophie's picture sat nearby, her smiling face a beacon through the fog of my fear. I realized then, this wasn't just about keeping a secret. This was about silencing us forever. 2 days had passed since Ruth's icy offer sat between us like a loaded gun. Even now, the memory of her smug expression gnawed at the back of my mind. Money. She had offered me a neat little check tucked inside a bland white envelope, like bribing me could erase the image of Sophie shrinking away from her. I'd laughed then, a hollow sound even I didn't recognize before walking out without a word. The insult lingered, heavier than the Texas humidity clinging to my skin. At the bakery, the air felt different. The usual morning bustle was oddly muted. Mrs. Calloway, who never missed a chance to gush about her grandchildren, barely muttered a greeting. 2 teenage girls giggled in the corner, casting glances my way. My gut twisted. By noon, it was clear. The storm had started. People who used to greet me warmly now stiffened. They whispered just loud enough for me to hear fragments. Words like attention seeker and making stuff up. At school pickup, Mrs. Landry, Sophie's teacher, barely met my eyes. Her smile, once genuine, now seemed forced, brittle. Sophie ran toward me, her little arms swinging wide, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around us. I clutched her tight, my heart hammering in my chest. Ruth was poisoning the well, and the venom was spreading fast. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep with Mr. Buttons tucked against her cheek, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched cup of coffee. The rumors, they had Dana's fingerprints all over them. She had always been Ruth's echo, eager to twist the knife when the opportunity arose. 16 years ago. I remembered Dana at my graduation party, slithering up to my boyfriend with a coy smile, whispering lies until he turned cold. She didn't need truth. She needed power. Now the same tactic unfolded against my daughter. Word was spreading that Sophie had made everything up out of jealousy, desperate for attention because Ruth favored her other grandkids. A neat little narrative, clean, plausible, toxic. I scrubbed a hand over my face, fighting the rising panic. I had to protect Sophie. But how? The walls were closing in, brick by poisoned brick. The next morning at the bakery, the glances sharpened. An old customer, Mr. Jenkins, approached the counter hesitantly. "Marla," he said, his voice low. "Folks are saying things about Sophie." I forced a smile that felt like splintered glass. "People say a lot of things," I replied evenly, sliding a bag of scones across the counter. He hesitated, then left without another word. Back home, I curled beside Sophie as she colored quietly, her small shoulders hunched in concentration. The weight of it pressed down on me, their lies, their cruelty, their need to destroy anything that didn't fit neatly into their version of family. I couldn't let them break her. That night, as I tucked her in, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message, no number attached. "You're making a mistake. Walk away before it's too late." My blood ran cold. I sat there, staring at the screen, listening to Sophie's soft breathing. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was already deep behind enemy lines. The bakery clock ticked louder than it should have in the empty lull between lunch and dinner rush. I sat at the corner table, my hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, feeling every stare that hadn't yet been cast but would be. Doubt seeped into my bones like a slow-moving poison. Maybe if I had been quieter. Maybe if I'd stayed in my lane like they wanted. Number. I shoved the thought away. This was not my fault. Ruth, Dana, they were the architects of this ugly theater, painting Sophie and me as villains while cloaking themselves in neighborly smiles. My phone buzzed, a notification flashing across the cracked screen. I opened it absent-mindedly, but the breath caught in my throat. Screenshots. Dozens of them. Fabricated messages, supposedly from Sophie, boasting to a friend about making up lies to get attention. My hands shook as I scrolled, the words blurring together. "This'll show them who's boss," one message read. Another gloated, "Granny Ruth always liked the others better. Time to teach her." It was sick. Sophie's vocabulary wasn't even this advanced, and the tone was so painfully artificial it made my stomach churn. Dana. It reeked of her. I paced the bakery floor, rage blistering just beneath my skin. They weren't content with isolating me. They were coming for Sophie's very character, twisting her into a petty, jealous liar in the eyes of everyone we knew. The floorboards creaked under my heels as I moved. I had to find a way to fight back. Sitting down again, I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a name I hadn't thought of in years. Carla Whitman, Travis's ex-neighbor. I hesitated, then pressed call. It rang twice. "Hello? Carla? It's Marla Ellis," I said quickly, voice low. I need to ask you something about Travis." A pause, then a cautious, "What's this about?" I swallowed. "Something bad. I think it's happening again." Silence stretched like smoke. Finally, she spoke, voice tight. Meet me at Morrison's Diner, 10 minutes. The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead as I slipped into a cracked vinyl booth across from Carla. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, her hands fidgeting with her wedding band. Travis, she said without preamble. Back then, there was a situation. A kid from the neighborhood, hurt bad. Word was Travis lost his temper over something stupid. His family paid off the boy's parents to keep it quiet. Her eyes met mine, dark and hollow. They made it disappear. A chill licked down my spine. A pattern. Ruth, Travis, Dana, all of them experts at rewriting reality when it didn't suit them. Sophie had been their next casualty. I thanked her and left, my feet moving on autopilot, my mind spinning like a hurricane. They had covered up violence before. They would do it again, unless I stopped them. Back home, I tucked Sophie into bed and kissed her forehead. Her innocent breathing filled the dark room, a fragile, precious sound. I stood in the hallway, staring at the sliver of light leaking beneath her door. No more fear, no more waiting. If they wanted a war, they'd chosen the wrong mother to fight. The house breathed around me, the walls absorbing my anger and grief as I sat at the kitchen table. A half-finished cup of tea grew cold in my hand. I stared at the chipped edge of the table, the surface where Sophie once scribbled her spelling words. That simple life felt like a fairy tale now. Betrayal cracked the foundation of everything I thought I knew, but the pain sharpened my focus instead of dulling it. I wouldn't make the mistake of confronting them directly. That's what they expected. No, my rebellion would be quiet, deliberate, and devastating. I checked the clock, heart hammering. 10 minutes until my meeting. Grabbing my keys, I headed to the dimly lit cafe just outside our neighborhood, my nerves tight as a drum. Mrs. Langley was already there, tucked into a back booth, her eyes flickering anxiously. She looked up and waved me over, her hands trembling slightly around a coffee cup. "You're brave for doing this," I said under my breath as I slid into the booth. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she whispered, leaning in. "People think Travis just lost his temper once. That's a lie. There were others. A little girl with a broken arm, a neighbor's dog that disappeared, and Ruth. She covered for him every time." A heavy silence hung between us. I kept my phone hidden beneath my scarf, recording every word. "They'd threaten families. Money would appear. Stories would change," Mrs. Langley added, voice cracking. "We all knew, but nobody wanted trouble. Ruth made sure of that." I nodded, throat tight with a mix of horror and grim satisfaction. I finally had something real. Not rumors, not accusations. Proof. When the conversation ended, I walked out into the thick evening air, feeling more alive and more hunted than ever before. I barely had time to catch my breath when Ruth showed up at my door. I opened it just a crack, enough to see her standing there, perfectly composed, cradling a small velvet box like it contained the world's salvation. "Marla," she began, her voice syrupy, "I want to make things right between us." I said nothing. She opened the box with a theatrical flourish. Inside lay a delicate gold necklace, gleaming under the porch light. "Something for you. A token. To help us all move past this," she said, eyes gleaming with something colder than kindness. I stared at it. Pretty. Expensive. Meaningless. "You think I'm that cheap?" I asked quietly. Her smile faltered. I didn't touch the necklace. I didn't invite her inside. I didn't even pretend to entertain the idea. I simply closed the door in her face, the latch clicking like a gunshot. Inside, I pressed my back against the door, my chest heaving. They were getting desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. I double-locked the door, then slid the bolt across for good measure. If she thought a necklace could chain me, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The house was silent, except for the scratching of my pen against paper. The night pressed against the windows, thick and heavy, as I sat drafting the complaint letter to Child Protective Services. Every word felt like a blow struck in defense of Sophie. Each sentence was a thread weaving a net they wouldn't escape. I read it over twice before tucking it away in the folder, my hands steady for the first time in days. Outside, the wind howled low and steady, rattling the porch swing like a warning whispered through the dark. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. I pulled on my jacket, slipped the folder into my bag, and drove toward Ruth's house. No invitation, no announcement. Tonight they would hear me. The front yard was cluttered with parked cars, laughter spilling out from the porch lights. I pushed through the door without knocking. Heads turned. Conversations stumbled into silence. Ruth stood at the center of it all, drink in hand, her smile freezing into a brittle mask the moment she saw me. "We need to talk," I said loudly, letting my voice slice through the room like a blade. "Marla, this isn't the time," Ruth began, stepping toward me with practiced concern. "It's exactly the time." I pulled out the small recorder from my pocket and held it up for all to see. "I know about Travis, about the cover-ups, about you paying off people to stay quiet." A ripple of shock tore through the room. "And Sophie," I continued, my voice unwavering, "is not a liar. She's a child who trusted you, and you betrayed her." Dana shifted uncomfortably near the fireplace, arms crossed, the smirk twitching at her lips betraying her smugness. "You're paranoid," Ruth hissed, stepping closer, her breath sharp with wine. "You want to burn this family down over gossip?" I leaned in, voice low and sharp. "I'm giving you a choice. Stop the lies. Stop the manipulation, or I'll take this public, and not just to CPS." The color drained from Ruth's face for a moment, but she rallied quickly, jaw tightening. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You think anyone will side with you? You're nothing without this family. We'll sue you for defamation, cut you off from the will, make you a pariah." I smiled, cold and thin. "I have nothing to lose." Dana barked a bitter laugh from behind her wineglass. "You always were the dramatic one, Marla." I didn't flinch, didn't back down. I just met their gaze, feeling the weight of every slight, every whispered betrayal solidify into armor around me. "You've been warned," I said. "This is your last chance." I turned and walked out, the heavy door slamming shut behind me like a judge's gavel. The night air hit me hard, but I welcomed it. I strode toward my car, heart pounding with adrenaline and certainty. Then I saw it, 2 tires sagging low, slashed to ribbons. Cold fury prickled along my skin. They wanted a war? I just changed the rules. Fixing the slashed tires wasn't the hard part. It was the way the silence changed when I walked into a room, the way familiar faces averted their eyes. Houston's autumn heat felt colder somehow, brittle like everything around me was ready to crack. I opened the bakery as usual, forcing a smile while carrying the invisible weight stitched across my back. Customers trickled in slower than usual. A couple of women whispered at the door before deciding they didn't need cupcakes that badly. I wiped down the counters harder than necessary, each pass scrubbing at the growing stain I couldn't see, but felt down to my bones. The city inspector arrived just after noon. A sharp knock, a clipboard, and a grim face. "We've received some complaints," he said flatly. "Anonymous." I knew. I didn't need a crystal ball to see Ruth and Dana's fingerprints smeared across this mess. He walked through the bakery with his little flashlight, lifting cutting boards, inspecting behind freezers, nitpicking, pretending to find things that weren't there. By the time he left, I had a notice taped to my front window, temporary suspension pending further review. My heart dropped, but I didn't let it shatter. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. I stared at the closed sign dangling pathetically against the glass. I didn't have money for a lawyer, but I had something better: community. I made calls, sent texts. I organized a pop-up bake sale in the church parking lot down the street. People remembered Sophie's birthday cakes, the pies for the Thanksgiving fundraisers, the free cookies handed out to kids after Sunday service. Slowly, names started trickling in: Miss Aguilar from the school board, Mr. Jenkins who coached Little League, even cranky old Mrs. Connors who always complained about frosting being too sweet showed up. The day of the pop-up sale, the lot buzzed like a beehive. Tables loaded with cupcakes, cookies, tarts, all homemade, all spotless. Friends brought lawn chairs, kids darted between booths, Someone played country music from a pickup truck bed. People came. They didn't just buy, they asked what happened. I kept it simple. The bakery's closed for now, but we're fighting back. I didn't sling mud. I didn't need to. By sunset, we sold out everything. More than that, I gathered written testimonials from dozens of people, vouching for my bakery's cleanliness and my character. Proof. Proof that wouldn't just defend me, it would expose whoever tried to destroy me. I was stacking chairs into my trunk when I saw the letter. No envelope, no stamp, just tucked under the windshield wiper like a sick little greeting card. I pulled it free with 2 fingers, heart thudding louder than the fading music around me. Scrawled in thick black ink. Back off, or next time it's not just your bakery. The noise online was deafening. Overnight, my name flooded local pages, dragged through comment threads like trash in a gutter. Ruth had twisted the story masterfully, playing the victim of a bitter, unstable woman, me. Friends I once baked birthday cakes for now typed things like, "You can't trust people like that," with the casual cruelty only distance can afford. Standing on the courthouse steps, I felt the weight of 1,000 invisible eyes. Sophie clutched my hand tighter, sensing the tension crackling in the air. Every smile I had trusted was now sharpened into a sneer. I lifted my chin. I wasn't here to hide. I didn't see it coming. Ruth's ambush was artful in its ugliness. At the so-called family reunion in the city park, she stood in front of everyone, cousins, aunts, uncles, and announced with theatrical sadness that I had embezzled family funds and faked evidence against Travis out of jealousy. Her voice trembled just enough to be convincing. Dana hovered at her side, arms crossed, lips curled into a private little smirk. I blinked, stunned. Words wouldn't form. I felt Sophie's tiny fingers loosen from mine, saw her confusion widen into fear. Around us, whispers ignited like brush fires. The air grew heavier, thicker. My father stepped forward, a line creased deep into his forehead. His voice was flat, cold. "Marla, we trusted you." The betrayal stabbed deeper than Ruth's lies ever could. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the wall of judgment had already been built. They didn't want the truth. They wanted an easy villain, and I had been volunteered. I stumbled back a step, swallowing against the rising bile. Somewhere inside, a dam broke. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall here, in front of them. 16 years ago, I'd felt this same coldness when I told them Travis had scared me once, just once, and they had brushed it aside as young people drama. That day, their silence had spoken louder than any words. Today, it roared. I walked away, each step heavier than the last. The parking lot blurred around me, a landscape of betrayal. I reached my car, slammed the door, and screamed into the steering wheel until my voice cracked. It would have been easier to give up. To pack Sophie's clothes, sell the bakery, and disappear somewhere nobody knew our names. But as the sun dipped low behind the courthouse and the world shrank to the sound of my own heartbeat, I realized something brutal and clarifying. I didn't owe them silence. I owed Sophie the truth. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my jacket and unlocked my phone. I had evidence, recordings, testimonials, the history of Travis's violence. Pieces scattered, yes, but sharp enough to cut through the lies if wielded right. Scrolling through my files, I assembled them into a single brutal package. A notification blinked at the top of my screen, an anonymous tip warning me that Ruth wasn't finished, that her next move would be personal. I tucked the phone into my pocket, a steady burn igniting in my chest. They thought they had broken me. They hadn't even started. I sat across from my lawyer, the sterile air of the office thick with anticipation. Neatly stacked folders, bank statements, email prints, transaction records formed a barricade between me and the chaos Ruth had spun. My hands stayed steady as we reviewed them one last time. Every word, every number, felt like a brick in the fortress I was about to unleash. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to burn down their lies. The conference room at the estate meeting buzzed with shallow greetings and fake smiles. Ruth entered, dressed in navy blue, her heels clacking with a certainty that made bile rise in my throat. My parents followed close behind, stiff and cold. Their eyes didn't meet mine. Ruth wasted no time. "We're here today to finalize the transfer of assets," she began, her voice syrupy sweet, "and to address certain troublesome allegations." I let her speak, let her confidence swell until it was ripe for the fall. When she finished, I rose. I placed a thick envelope on the table and slid it to the estate attorney without a word. His eyebrows lifted as he flipped through the contents, face paling with every turn. The room changed. Murmurs rippled through the air as copies of wire transfers and forged signatures were passed around. Email chains showing Ruth instructing Travis to handle certain financial discrepancies. Confidential settlements that screamed guilt louder than any courtroom could. "You lying little—" Ruth lunged to snatch the papers, but the damage was done. The betrayal they saw could not be unseen. My mother gasped audibly. My father sat back, his hands trembling on the table. Dana, standing behind Ruth, backed away like the ship was sinking faster than she could swim. "You think you can turn them against me?" Ruth spat, voice cracking. "You're pathetic, Marla, always have been." "No," I said, my voice sharp as glass. "You did that all by yourself." The attorney cleared his throat. "Given this new evidence, we'll be halting all transfers pending further investigation. Legal counsel will reach out to each of you." Ruth's face flushed an ugly mottled red. "You think this is over?" she hissed, rounding the table toward me. Security, pre-warned, moved quickly, but not fast enough to stop Ruth's palm from connecting with my cheek, the crack echoing like a gunshot in the stunned silence. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at her, really looked at her. A woman so eaten alive by hate she couldn't see she had lost everything. 2 security guards restrained her, dragging her toward the exit as she kicked and cursed. She twisted her head around, her glare locking onto me with venom so pure it chilled the room. Her voice dropped to a low, trembling snarl. "This isn't over, Marla. Not by a long shot." The door slammed behind her, leaving only the heavy, broken breathing of everyone she had once fooled. I exhaled slowly. The war she started might still rage, but today, the truth had finally drawn blood. The bakery smelled of vanilla and resilience. I stood behind the counter, wiping down surfaces that had once been tainted by whispers and suspicion. Now, the laughter of customers floated back to me, light and real. The sun dipped lower outside, casting long, amber streaks across the floor, and I let the silence hug me for a moment. I had survived the fire, and somehow found myself tempered rather than broken. Nights were still the hardest. When Sophie was asleep, and the house fell into a hush that no TV or podcast could quite fill, I would feel the weight settle back onto my chest, a phantom ache for what family was supposed to mean. But then I'd remember Sophie's giggle over pancakes that morning, or the way my regulars rallied around my reopening like it was a small-town festival. Slow steps forward, that was all I could promise myself. When we reopened the bakery, I didn't expect anything grand. I had prepared myself for empty chairs and awkward glances, but I hadn't accounted for human kindness. Balloons bobbed outside the door. Baskets of flowers crowded the counter. Neighbors I thought I'd lost trickled in, offering apologies folded into hugs and buying loaves they probably didn't even need. Mrs. Langley showed up, tears brimming. "You're tougher than they ever thought you'd be, honey," she said, squeezing my hand. I believed her. Business didn't just bounce back, it grew. Somehow, the ugliness had fertilized something fierce and alive inside me. I organized baking classes for local kids, started hosting pop-up community nights. I became, at long last, more than the wreckage Ruth had tried to frame me with. Still, not all shadows faded. Now and then, I'd spot a dark car idling too long down the street, or a new face in the bakery, eyes a little too sharp, lingered a little too long. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. I changed the locks. I kept my phone charged. I learned to live with one eye open. even as I learned to smile again. Forgiveness wasn't as simple as a prayer or a decision. It was a slow, grinding choice, made every morning when I laced up my shoes and opened my doors to the world. Sometimes I hated Ruth for making me wary. Sometimes I pitied her too. 16 years ago, I would have begged for her love. Now I saw the hunger behind her cruelty, a hunger that would devour her long before it ever touched me again. The holidays rolled in with chilly mornings and cinnamon air. Sophie helped me hang fairy lights around the bakery, her laughter spilling into the street. We had a future, tattered maybe, imperfect, but ours. One evening, locking up, I found a small note tucked into the bakery doorframe. No return address, no signature, just a line, scrawled sharp and hurried, still watching. I held the note, feeling the old fear prickle at the edges of my mind, but I didn't crumble. I didn't run. I burned the paper, watched the ash twist into the night air, and turned back to the warm glow of my shop. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, but neither will I. Looking back, if there's one truth life has etched into me, it's this. Real strength isn't about winning the loud battles. It's about surviving the silent ones, the nights you cry alone, the days you keep going when everything inside you says quit. Betrayal and loss don't get the final word, unless we let them. We get to decide who we become after the breaking. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to be broken. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between staying silent or standing tall? I would love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If this video touched your heart, comment with a 1, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate with you, tell me why. Your voice matters here too. If you found even a sliver of hope or strength in this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world, and it helps bring more heartfelt, real-life stories like this one to life. See you in the next chapter.